Hello and welcome to this tutorial on top 25 Node.js interview questions by Intellipaat. Node.js is a rapidly growing technology in the backend development world. According to a survey by Stack Overflow, over 47% of developers prefer Node.js for backend development due to its speed, scalability, and extensive ecosystem of libraries and tools. Its non-blocking, event-driven architecture makes it a go-to choice for building real-time and scalable applications. Companies like Netflix, LinkedIn, Walmart, Uber, and eBay use Node.js extensively to power their platform, highlighting its reliability and efficiency. After thorough research and studying hundreds of interviews, I have compiled this comprehensive list of questions. These cover both basic concepts and advanced topics, ensuring you are well prepared regardless of your experience level. With that being said, let's look at the very first question.
Okay, so starting up with the very first question, which is what is Node.js? So Node.js is an open source, cross-platform, meaning it can run on iOS, Android, Windows, or any other platform, JavaScript runtime environment that allows you to use JavaScript beyond the browser. Yes, on the server side. And what I mean by this is, while you could write JavaScript code in VS Code or any text editor, it had no runtime environment to execute the code unless it was embedded with an HTML file. For example, you would write JavaScript in script tag, right? So firstly, you would write script, and then inside this, you would write your JavaScript code. And then you would open this file. Suppose you would have saved this file naming HTML 1.html, and then you would open this file in a browser to see the result. And Node.js changed this completely. It provided a runtime environment to execute JavaScript directly onto the computer or the server and independent of the browser. So Node.js is a single-threaded, non-blocking architecture which is scalable and fast and supported by a rich tool and libraries to execute JavaScript directly onto the server side. Okay. So moving ahead with our next question, which is what is the difference between Node.js and JavaScript? So firstly, we will see what we mean by JavaScript. So JavaScript is a scripting language. Okay. So JavaScript is a scripting language used to create interactive features on website, and Node.js is a tool that allows you to run JavaScript outside of a browser on a server side. Okay. So whenever you go to a website and whenever you see pop-ups, right? Whenever you see pop-ups or animations or images and dynamic content, these all comes under JavaScript. Using JavaScript, you can do all these things, which is used to make web pages interactive. For example, updating content, form validation, animation, and runs on a browser and works within the script tag inside HTML files and executes directly to the browser. On the other hand, Node.js allows to run JavaScript on the server. For example, you can use Node.js to make web servers, APIs, and handle data requests. And it is great for tasks like managing multiple connections at once because of its event-driven and non-blocking nature. So you can say that JavaScript is used in browsers to make websites interactive, whereas you use Node.js, which allows JavaScript to be used on server. We can say like a backend sort of thing. Okay. Moving ahead with our next question, which is, can you explain the working of Node.js? So Node.js works on a unique architecture that is very efficient. So imagine multiple clients like user sending request. So suppose client 1 is sending a request 1 and client 2 is sending a request 2. So these requests can be of two types. Okay. Firstly, talking about non-blocking request, which includes small tasks like reading of a file or sending HTTP request. Okay. And second is blocking IO. which includes querying the databases. For example, user want any information from a database, so he'll send a blocking request. So all the incoming requests are placed in an event queue. You can see a queue over here, right? This is called an event queue, and all the requests are being placed here. You can think of it as a line where each request waits to be processed. So the event queue ensures that no request is ensured and they are picked one by one. Okay, so coming to this event loop. So you can say this event loop as the heart of the Node.js. Node.js operates on a single thread that continuously runs the event loop, and the event loop is a mechanism that picks up the request one by one from this queue and decides whether a request is blocking or non-blocking. So for non-blocking IO request, the event loop handles it directly. If the request is non-blocking, the event loop quickly processes them without waiting, and once done, the response is directly sent to the client. For example, suppose client asks for a file. Node.js reads the file and sends directly result back immediately. So if the request is non-blocking, it is directly sent and processed. And if the request is blocking, for example, querying the database or complex computation, the event loop cannot process it alone. So it sends the request to libu thread pool. And libu is a library that manages this thread pool and handles heavy tasks in the background using multiple threads. For example, T1, T2, T3. And once the task is complete, the thread sends the result back to event loop. For example, suppose there is one client. Okay. He sends a request to the database. The thread pool processes the query. Then there is this thread pool which processes the query in the background and sends the result back to event loop. Then it will send the result back to event loop, and then the response will be sent. So this is how the Node.js functions in the background, and the core purpose is achieving a high quality result through proper planning and execution. Okay, moving ahead with our next question, which is, why is Node.js single threaded? So Node.js is single threaded to keep things simple and efficient. Unlike traditional server that creates multiple threads to handle requests, Node.js uses just one single main thread. Only one main thread is there. Okay. Why? Because this design reduces the complexity and avoids problem like thread conflict or deadlock. And how the single threaded architecture works. So whenever the request comes in, Node.js processes all the requests in this event queue, like fetching data from memory. The loop directly handles them. And for more tasks, the reading of a file or querying the database, Node.js passes these requests to thread pool, as we discussed in the earlier question. And once the task is done, the result is sent back. So this approach makes Node.js super lightweight and scalable. Because it's single-threaded, it can handle thousands of simultaneous requests without extra overhead of managing thread. And since JavaScript is naturally single-threaded, this fits perfect for the JavaScript, and it is easy to use for developer familiar with JavaScript. Okay, so moving ahead with our next question, which is, why is Node.js so popular these days? So Node.js has gained popularity due to its key advantage in modern web development. It allows developer to use JavaScript for both client side and server side. So JavaScript now can be used in both server and client side, simplifying development and reducing the need for multiple languages. It is a non-blocking event-driven model, lets and handle many requests concurrently, making it highly efficient for real-time application like chat apps and live updates. So it's an effective tooling at NPM, high speed, ubiquity, data streaming, database queries, real-time web app, single code base, proxy server, and productivity. So all these features of Node.js makes it perfect for building microservices and handling high traffic with minimal resource. And it is also backed by a strong developer community and used by major companies, like all the major companies like Netflix or Uber uses this Node.js. So these all factors combined make Node.js a popular choice, making it so effective for high performance and scalable web application. So moving ahead with our next question, which is how to write hello world using Node.js. Okay, to write a hello world program in Node.js, you have to perform these steps. So firstly, you have to create a file, you have to create a simple HTTP server, and you have to run the program. I have already written this code in my VS Code, so I'll show you how this works. So you see, I have already written this code on how to write hello world. So here's the code. I have created a server and I'm sending the request and running on the local host 8080. Okay, so let me run this code. Okay, so let's go on a browser and type localhost 8080. So you see it's written hello world here. Okay. So what we are doing, we are just creating a file. This code is creating a simple HTTP server which is responding with hello world when accessed on the port 8080. Okay. So moving ahead with our next question, which is what is synchronous and asynchronous programming? So this is a very important question which is mostly asked in all the interviews. So the difference between synchronous and asynchronous programming primarily concern how tasks are executed in relation to one another. So talking about the synchronous programming, in synchronous programming, tasks are executed one after the another in a sequential manner, and each task wait for the previous one to finish before. For example, if you have a set of statement, set A, set B, set C. Suppose set A is taking 2 seconds, set B is taking 10 seconds, and set C is taking again 2 seconds. So in synchronous programming, this set C will only process after the set B has completed its execution. So if the task is taking time, such as reading file or making a network request, the entire program has to wait, which can lead to delays and poor performance. So nobody would want a code with poor performance or more waiting time. So explaining in a more simpler manner, if you have a program that fetches data from server, right? It will wait for server's response before proceeding to next task. During this wait, the program is blocked and cannot do anything else. So explaining this synchronous programming in a very simpler manner. So if you have a program, suppose PA, that fetches data from server, okay? So it will wait for the server's response. Suppose it sent the request and it will wait for this response before proceeding to next task. And during this wait, the program is blocked. It's blocked. It can't do anything else. This is like standing in a line and waiting for your turn before moving forward. Okay. Whereas in asynchronous programming, it allows tasks to run concurrently without waiting for other tasks to complete. It is particularly used for time-consuming operation like I/O tasks because it allows the program to continue doing other work while waiting for the result, which improves the performance and responsiveness, especially in application like web server or real-time system. So this is process A, this is process B. This process A will continue its working even if it is not getting the response directly here. So it will continue working, and meanwhile this process B, when it is completed its execution, it will send the response and process A can get the response later on also. So let me show you the code for this. So you see this code is a perfect example for a asynchronous programming. So it will start, it is taking 1000 seconds to run this line and this is ending. So in asynchronous programming, what it will do, you see it's starting, it's ending, and after 1000 seconds, it's fetching data. It's showing, okay. So it's not blocking the statement. Statement 1 is being run, statement 5 is being run, and then after that, when this statement has completed its execution, it's being run. Whereas in synchronous programming, see, firstly this start, this will fetch the data and this will end. So you see this second statement, it will further block the execution. So now I hope you are clear with what is synchronous and asynchronous programming. Moving ahead with our next question, which is how does Node.js achieve asynchronous programming? So Node.js achieves asynchronous programming using its event-driven approach. Event-driven approach. We already discussed what do we mean by this event-driven approach. And the non-blocking IO model. Non-blocking IO model. You remember we discussed the whole working of Node.js architecture, event loop, and this what are non-blocking IOs. So when an asynchronous task like reading file or network request, whenever this is initiated, Node.js offload the task to system's event loop. So Node.js just gives this task to event loop, making its main thread free to continue execution. So now the main thread is freed and it can continue its execution. So the event loop is at core of the Node.js asynchronous behavior. It listens for the complete task and execute their associated callbacks, ensuring the program doesn't pause or block while waiting for the operation to finish. So this allows Node.js to handle multiple tasks. To manage the asynchronous operation, Node.js provides several tools. For example, callback, promises, async, await. So callbacks are the function which is passed an argument and executed after an asynchronous task complete, ensuring non-blocking execution. What are promises? Which promises represent the eventual result of an async task, enabling chaining with then and catch for continued processing. What do we mean by async and await? We've already seen this, which simplifies async programming by pausing code execution at await until a promise is resolved. Okay, so let me quickly show you the code for callbacks, promises, and async await to get a clear understanding. Okay, so this code uses Node.js FS module, okay, file system module, to read a file asynchronously. The FS read file takes the file name. Here it's example.txt we have made here, okay, encoding UTF-8 and a callback function. So this is a callback function. The callback function handles two scenarios. If an error occurs, for example, the file doesn't exist, so it will show you the error reading the file, and if the file exists, it will load the file content. Okay, so let's run this program. Okay, so file content, the file is empty, but the file is made. So suppose I'm writing here that hello callback, and if I go again in this callback, and if I'm running this, so see it's showing file content hello callback. And if I delete this one, if I delete this, and if again I run this one, then let's say see error reading the file because the file is not present only. So let me make the file again, example.txt. Okay, so this non-blocking approach allows the program to continue executing other tasks while the file is being read in the background. Moving to promises, so it will do, if the data is there, it will handle the request and it will load data. If it is not, it will show you the error. Okay, now let's run this file. Error reading the data because the data is not there in the file. Moving to async, what it is doing, it is also using the FS module to read the data, and with try and catch, it is handling the request or pausing the execution until it is being resolved. So the file is there, so it's asking for the file content. So what if I delete this file and again I just run it? So you see It's again giving the error because the content is not there. It can't read the file. Okay. Moving ahead with the next question, which is what is event loop in Node.js and how does it work? So we already discussed this event loop quite a number of time in our previous questions also. So Node.js achieves asynchronous programming through its event-driven architecture. And the core mechanism behind this is the event loop. This loop continuously monitors for its completed task, executes for corresponding callbacks, and ensuring the application remains responsive. Okay. So instead of blocking the main thread, Node.js allows tasks to complete in background and process their result only when ready using this event loop. So this is the event queue, this is the thread pool, it's giving the response, operation completed, requests are coming and being processed using this event loop. So this is for the event loop. Moving ahead with our next question, which is what is a callback hell and what are the methods to avoid it? Again, a very important question, guys. So callback hell refers to a situation in Node.js where the nested callbacks grow too complex, making the code hard to read, understand, and maintain. So see the function, inside this function, another function. This function is calling this another function and this another. So it is a situation where deeply nested callback make code difficult to read, maintain, and debug. Sequential asynchronous tasks relying on the previous result lead to a pyramid of doom. So maybe your interviewer can ask why the callback hells are also known as pyramid of dooms, resulting in a messy, error-prone, and hard to modify code structure. So the problem with callback hell is that it makes your code very error-prone. Meaning if something breaks or you need to change a part or logic of a code, it is challenging to untangle the nested layer. For example, you want to change something in this part of code, but this part of code relies on this and this part of code relies on this and this continues on. So you see it's making a pyramid kind of structure. And to avoid the callback hell, modern JavaScript offer better solution. So we have promises. So instead of nesting callback, promise let you chain using dot then, we already saw the code, then and catch, okay, making the flow linear and readable. Because if any error occurs, this promise then and there resolves it. Second is async await. So this simplifies the promise further. Using await, your code looks more like synchronous code while still being asynchronous. So this second one is async and await. And the third one is control flow libraries. So tools like Async.js can help manage complex asynchronous workflow cleanly. So these tools and technique improve clarity and maintainability, making the Node.js code easier to work with. So the methods promise, async await, and control flow libraries. Moving ahead with our next question, what are promises in Node.js? So promises in Node.js are a way to handle asynchronous operations such as fetching data or reading file. What I mean by this is, instead of writing complex nested callbacks, which can become messy, promises allows us to write cleaner and more readable code. So it offers cleaner and more readable alternative to nested callbacks. So promise has only two functions, resolve and reject. So resolve is called when the operation is successful. Resolve operation is successful. Rejected when the operation is not successful. Okay. So the promise is having two states, resolved and rejected. So if the operation is rejected, then too the output will go here with some statement like error or something. If it is resolved, the success message will show here. Okay. So let's see the example. Okay. So this is the code for the promise. So in this line, we are creating a new promise using this two parameter, resolve and reject. And we are simulating an operation that determines success or failure. So we are determining this, let success as true, which sets to false to simulate failure. So if the operation is success, then my resolve will be called and operation was successful. And if not, something went wrong. So this my promise dot then will handle this function value and will console the value. And this function will handle the error. So let's run this code. So see, operation was successful. So this this my resolve was called, and this is showing that the operation was successful. So this is how the promise works. Okay, so moving ahead with our next question, which is how can you use async await in Node.js? Provide an example. I forgot to write. Okay. So in Node.js, you can use async await to handle asynchronous operation more cleanly and efficiently. So talking firstly about the async, it is used to define a function that will return a promise. Okay. And the function becomes asynchronous even if no explicit promise is returned. Coming to await, this keyword pauses the execution of a async function until the promise is resolved. So suppose there is a async function and inside this there is a await operation. So if the promise is resolved, the code will continue the execution and it will show that the function is completed. And if the promise is rejected, the code will show an error of being rejected. So the function will return the resolved value or it will throw an error if the promise is rejected. So you got to know that async and await, these two methods are used for handling the promises in a code. Okay. Moving ahead with the next question, which is what is Package.json? So Package.json file is like heart of a Node.js project, and what I mean by this is it holds all the important details and settings. So it holds all the details and settings of the project. So this contains all the important information about the project. For example, project name, what's your project name? Here it's given my app, the version, the description of the project, the main function, the author and the license. So it also keeps the track of tools and packages the project needs to run, which are called as dependencies. So you must have heard what are these projects dependencies. Okay. So in simple term, it helps Node.js know how to run the project and what tools it needs. For example, it tells the project which file is starting point. For example, you all know that in any project, the index.js is the starting point. And the version of Node.js and npm which is required. So you can create a package.json file either by running this simple command npm init in your terminal, which guides you through the setup or writing it manually. Alongside it helps manage dependencies and it makes sure that your project can easily be shared. It can easily be shared with other developers or anyone can contribute in your code. Okay. So moving ahead with our next question, what are top 5 built-in modules commonly used in Node.js? So for understanding this, we should have a clarity of what do we mean by modules. So modules in Node.js are self-contained blocks of reusable codes. Reusable codes that can include functions, variable or objects. Functions, variable or objects, which help organize application by exporting specific functionality which can then be imported and used in other part of program. So first is this HTTP, which is used to create a web server for handling client request. So we directly import this http.createServer. We don't write the whole functionality of what is written in this HTTP. So FS, which is file system, which handles the operation like reading, writing or deleting the file. So fs.write file sync, this function we can directly use. Then path, it manages and resolves file path effectively. Then OS, it provide information about the operating system, os.platform function. Then there comes the Express. It simplifies web application development with easy to use features, for example app.get. So these all are the 5 built-in module which is commonly used for modular applications. Okay, moving ahead with the next question. So what is a middleware in Node.js and why is it used? So middleware is a function used in web application to process request and response. It serves as a bridge between the client, server, enabling tasks like logging, authentication and error handling. Okay, so you see here this diagram. So it represents how middleware works in Node.js. So whenever there is an incoming request, okay, it passes through a series of middleware. You see this and this. Each middleware function can perform a specific task. Like for example, it is processing the data, okay, checking authentication or modifying request response. So after completing its task, for example, this middleware has completed the processing of data, then it will forward the result to this next middleware using this next function. At any point, if the middleware sends a response using respond.send, so it ends the process and subsequent middleware are not executed. For example, this processing has been done and no more further processing or modification is required, then it will call this rest.send function and the output, this will be directly shared here. And if no middleware sends a response, the request eventually reaches the final response handler to complete the process, and this flow makes a middleware very powerful for managing request processing in Node application. So if another modification is required, it will call the send next function, and if it is not, if the process has completed its execution here only, then it will call the respond.send function here, and it will give the response here. Okay, so moving ahead with the next question, which is what is the purpose of module export in Node.js? So module.export in Node.js is a feature that allows developer to make code modular by exporting functions, object or other data from one file to another so that it can be reused in another file. It is a property of module object. So this is a module, this is the property of the module object, and its value is what gets returned when a file is being imported using the require function. Okay, so what's the purpose? It ensures modular programming, it ensures code reusability, abstraction and separation of concerns. So let's see the workflow. So we are creating a module, for example module.js. What it contains a function add which is returning a plus b. Okay, so suppose we have made this function somewhere which is returning a plus b, and we are doing module.export add, meaning we are just exporting this add function, so we can use this add in any other part of the code. So let me show you how it works in our VS code. Okay, so see this is our module.js. It is containing a function add and subtract, and we are exporting. And this is app.js. We are importing the function here. Okay, constant add and subtract, and we are just writing the function and passing the parameter. We are not writing the whole code. So if we'll run this, you see we are getting 5 and 3 as the output without writing the whole code, and that's the beauty of a module. So it can be exported. So by using module.export, Node.js developer can write the clean and modular code. So moving ahead with the next question, which is what is the difference between Express.js and Node.js? So Node.js is an open source cross-platform runtime environment that allows JavaScript to run on the server. I already told you in the features of this Node.js. It provides essential features to build a server such as handling HTTP request, file system and more. And you can think of Node.js as a foundation for executing JS on the server. On the other hand, Express.js is a lightweight web framework built on the top of Node.js to simplify server creation. While Node.js offers the tool to build the server, Express enhances this by providing features like routing, middleware. We just talked about middleware. request handling, and making development faster and more efficient. So for example, whenever you are building a server, you require this HTTP request and with responses. With Express, you can do same with fewer lines of code and added flexibility. In essence, the Node.js is an engine and Express.js is a framework that makes driving the engine smoother and faster. Okay, so suppose here we have Node.js and here we have Express.js. So when we are making a server with Node.js, we have to write every line. For example, response.setHeader. Then we have to give the content type. Then we have response.write. Here also we have to give the type. Then we have again this response.write. And again title, then response.write again, then body, and this continues on. And then here finally server.listen. Okay, but when we are doing with this with Express.js, we just simply require to export this Express. We're requiring Express. We have to define a root. Okay. App.get request and response, 2 parameters, and then response.send, and then simple app.listen. So you see, this Express.js is very structured and streamlined, and it is very simpler to use and make a server. Okay. Moving ahead with our next question, which is what is event-driven programming? So event-driven programming is a programming paradigm where the flow of program is determined by event like user action, system notification, or data availability. In simple term, it means writing code that react to specific actions or triggers. Okay. So suppose you want to play a song. For playing a song, you have to click this button. Okay. It's a kind of a trigger. Okay. Which receives the data from servers which are in the forms of event. So I have clicked this. It has raised a trigger. It is fetching the data from server and it's displaying the result. So in Node.js, this concept is core to its design. It allows the creation of non-blocking asynchronous programs, meaning tasks don't have to wait for another to finish. Instead, the program continues to respond as the event occurs. At the heart of this models are event and event emitters. So event and event emitters are the two core parts of this event-driven programming. So events are signals like alert, while event emitters is like the manager that listens for these events and triggers specific actions. For example, callbacks when they happen. For example, when a connection event occurs, a handler function executes to manage that event. This approach makes program efficient and responsive. So you see, this is an event emitter, events, event loop, and event handler. So event emitter is listening for the triggers or action. It's going to events. This event loop is processing it, and the event handler is handling all the event. Okay. So let's understand this event emitter in more detail with a simple code. This code is using the event-driven programming using the events module. Okay. So here we are using this event module. First, an event emitter instance is created, which allows defining and handling custom events. Okay. So this event emitter with an on method registers a listener for greet. Okay. Whenever this greet is there, please listen to me. And where the callback functions take a name. This is the callback function is taking a name and logs a greeting message. This is logging a greeting message, hello, and whatever name we will pass here. So the emit method triggers the greet event and passes the argument. This is here, it's greet, it's triggering the event and it's passing the argument as Alice and Bob, causing the event listener to execute and display the message, which is causing the event to listen and execute the display message. Okay. For greet, I want Alice to be called. So here is the greet. I want this Alice to be called. So hello Alice. Again for this greet, I want Bob to be called. So hello Bob. Okay. So this is how the event-driven programming works. Moving ahead with our next question, which is what is the role of event module and how can you handle events in Node.js? So the event module in Node.js is essential for creating event-driven programming. It allows object to trigger the event and manage those events asynchronously, ensuring that Node.js operates in a non-blocking, efficient manner. So how to handle the event in Node.js is, firstly you create an event emitter which enables custom objects to emit events and register the listener. Then we have emitting event, which is a trigger, a specific event using the emit function. Then we have to create a event emitter, which triggers a specific event using .emit method, which is listening to events, attaches listener using .on for repeated triggers or once for a single occurrence. So we have seen in the previous code, we were using .on because we had a list of statements to execute. You remember Alice and then Bob. But for once, we have just a single occurrence. Okay. So in short, you can say that the event module enables event-driven behavior, making application efficient and responsive. Moving ahead with the next question, which is what is the role of buffer class in Node.js? So in Node.js, the buffer class is like the built-in object. It's like the built-in object used to handle raw binary data. JavaScript by default works with text, strings, but when dealing with binary data like reading and writing file, or handling over the streams, Node.js provides the buffer class to manage this data. So a buffer represents a fixed size chunk of memory which contains raw binary data. It differs from regular array because it only handles the binary data. Okay, so this we can say it's like the stream. It handles only the binary data and cannot be resized after creation, and each unit in buffer corresponds to 1 byte of data. So you know this is 1 byte, this is another, this is another. Okay, so you can create a buffer using methods like buffer.alloc, buffer.from, buffer.write or toString. So buffer.alloc, it allocates the buffer size, buffer.from, passing data here. It initializes the buffer with specific data like an array of string. So it is very useful when it comes to binary data handling, stream integration, encoding support and fixed size. You see this is going in the form of streams 1, 2, 3. Okay. Moving ahead with the next question, which is what is the difference between SetImmediate and SetTimeout? In Node.js, SetImmediate and SetTimeout both are used to schedule tasks, but they work differently in event loop. So SetImmediate runs immediately after the current event loop iteration. It has a higher priority than other IO. So whenever this SetImmediate function is called, so being the highest priority, it's run first. This means it executes as soon as possible, but still after the current IO tasks are complete. It is useful for time sensitive operation that need to happen right after the current task. So can we say that it works on priority 0? So it executes after the IO callback but before any timers. Talking about SetTimeout, it executes after a specified delay, okay, in milliseconds. It has a low priority compared to SetImmediate. It has a priority 0 and it has maybe priority 1 or 2 lesser than SetImmediate. It is useful for delaying the execution of code for specific duration, and it executes after all IO callbacks and some timers. Okay, so moving ahead with the next question, which is explain the Node.js web application architecture. So it is just the extended version of our question number maybe second or third, where we were seeing the working of the Node.js application architecture. We have the client which sends a request to server. We have server which process the client request and send back to result, bridging the front end and database. We have the event queue where all the requests are stored in sequence. We have event loop, which manages blocking and non-blocking request, and it forwards the blocking task to thread pool to free the main pool. We have the thread pool, which process the blocking task separately, ensuring that the event loop remain free for another task. And then we have external resource, which includes database and external system needed for specific task. Okay, so that architecture with asynchronous and non-blocking operation ensure that Node.js can handle a large number of simultaneous requests. We discussed it earlier also. So this is in more detail: request, event queue, event loop, thread loop, IO polling. Moving ahead with our next question, which is what are the type of stream available in Node.js? So we have particularly 4 types of stream, and streams are used to handle the data efficiently by reading or writing it in a small chunks. We have readable stream, which is used for reading data sequentially, like reading files with fs.create read stream. We have this writable stream, which is used for writing data such as writing files with fs.create write stream. We have duplex system, which can read data simultaneously, for example NetSocket for TCP connection. Then we have this transform stream for a special kind of duplex stream, which can both read and write data, that modifies data as it is read. For example, we have zlib.create gzip, which is used to compress data while reading it. So these streams help process large amount of data efficiently by breaking into smaller chunks, saving memory and time while handling data. Okay, so you see these are the type of stream: readable, writable, duplex, and transform. Moving ahead with our next question, which is what is the purpose of CreateServer of HTTP module? So the CreateServer module in Node.js module create a web server to handle client request. So this CreateServer method in Node.js HTTP module is for creating a web server to handle client request. So like this CreateServer method, it handles incoming requests from client like browser. So suppose I have requested some piece of information, it will go to this CreateServer, and then it listens for the request and it again sends back with a response. So how it works: when a user visits a website or request like loading of a web page, their browser sends a request to server. You all know sending a request. Then the CreateServer method allows to create that server. The server you create can listen for a request and respond with data or images, audio, or whatever you are requesting. So in short, the CreateServer is used to set up a server where you can define how the server should respond to different requests, allowing your app to serve content to the user. So a very simple line, for example, constant HTTP require HTTP. Let me show you. We discussed that question earlier also, how to write hello world. Maybe 6th question, I guess it was. Yeah. So see, this is creating the server. Require module HTTP. We are creating on the port 8080. So this was it. Okay. So moving ahead with our last question, which is what are some of the most commonly used libraries in Node.js? So in Node.js development, alongside body parser, cores, Express.js and Mongoose are 2 of the most commonly used libraries. Firstly, talking about Express.js, which is a minimal and flexible web application framework for Node.js, which provides a wide set of features to develop web and mobile application. I'm talking about the key features, which include routing, middleware support, templating engines, simplified server setup. So it's a go-to framework for if you want to build APIs and web applications. Moving ahead with Mongoose. So Mongoose is also a Node.js web application framework, which makes it easy to connect an application to a database. And if we talk about some of the key features of Mongoose, which is schemas and models, validation, middleware, querying and population. So overall, we can say that Mongoose abstract the complexity of MongoDB by offering powerful tools to streamline database interaction in a Node.js environment. And it is essential for building scalable and data-driven application. So that's all for this video. If you have liked this video, kindly hit the like and subscribe button for Intellipaat's YouTube channel.
See you in the next video.